Okay, great. Hello, welcome. Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, UC, for the introduction. Am I ready to go?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. The title of my talk is Head and the Heart, Embedding Trust, Care, and Play into the Peer-to-Peer Decentralized Web. This is my first time speaking at the annual conference for Network Society. And let me give you a little summary of where we're going to go for the next 30 minutes. I'm going to make sure I time myself. So I'm going to give you a little brief introduction about my background, the work that I've been doing, the way that my shift in thinking around technology and innovation has informed my organizing and writing for the past couple of years, and then talk about some three nested approaches to how we can embed mutual care, trust, and play into the decentralized web. And I'm actually really happy that I follow the previous two speakers who gave us a really great detailed tech view into how the decentralized web can work. I'm really going to be sort of focusing on the fleshy human side of that equation. And so here we go. So this is me when I'm 4. This is me pressing my face onto the glass. I feel like for the past couple of years, the way that I've been involved in technology has sort of been like this. I like have my face pressed against the glass in the way that I felt like doing policy work with the Electronic Frontier Foundation and some writing about the digital commons and working at the public library in Oakland, that I was kind of like on the outside a bit in thinking about how the technology is built. But more recently kind of like thinking about how can I help shape the ways in which people are even approaching innovation and the ways they're building technology. So over the last 10 plus years that I've been thinking about technology and social justice and digital commoning, what I've really come to realize is technology is never neutral. It's always an extension of ourselves, both in the ways that we are good to each other. If you look at, YouTube or TikTok or any, social media platform, you can see just the most beautiful, interesting things of humanity, right? Or look at the archive and look at the past and see, how technologies have been used to celebrate the things that are human about us. But at the same time, of course, it's also embedded with our biases, with the ways that we organize ourselves socioeconomically, and paying attention to the ways that technology is a tool and not something that is an inherent good in itself, I think is something that I really think about a lot. And in that, I think about, the digital commons. If we're going to have technology and it's not neutral, why not make it very biased towards treating each other well and having organizations where we're making those relationships explicit in the ways that we want to, see each other as equals, have fun, all the great things that we want out of technology that connects us. And so what are the digital commons? So digital means just operated or done with the fingers. Obviously, it's now we kind of just associate it with like the computer screens that we're looking at, the phones, the any number of kind of like tools in which we access information, interact with information, but really fundamentally just things that are done with our fingers. And commons. So oftentimes people think about the commons as like the material, like water that we share and air. But with commons thinking, David Bollier is a leading thinker on commoning. He defines it as a social system for the long-term stewardship of resources that preserves shared values and community identity. And so really, more recently commenting, and actually always, it's really been about the social systems. It's about the humans that are taking care of the thing that they are coming around to take care of together. Elinor Ostrom was a professor at Indiana University and Arizona University, who was the first woman Nobel Prize winner for economics in her work on economic governance and researching what she called common pool resources, or commons, and defined the social practices and norms and behaviors of the people who take care of things like a lake or a farm, or things that people are using together. And so if you look at her 8 principles for managing commons, you'll notice that they're all very much about the people. How do you define clear boundaries about who is part of governing that commons, who is able to access that resource? How do you ensure that there are ways to exit, to change the rules around how people are sharing that resource? And so sort of from, I guess like from the beginning, or I guess more recently, in defining these things as a social practice, Elinor Ostrom really laid the groundwork for that about 20 years ago. So there's certain types of digital commons that you might think of. Internet Archive, which is where I am, is an archive, a cultural research archive. Platform co-ops, which are an app or a service that is owned as a cooperative business, where the workers or the users are owners who are governing that application. Free and open source software, and which I won't explain because I think you all know free and open source software, but community networks, which are not as widely known, which are networks of like last mile infrastructure. So the access that you get from like your device from, that antenna or that internet service provider, and making that connection owned by the community, either as a cooperative and social enterprise, or as a public utility, like with a city or government controlled, but democratic is the point, democratically governed network. But for many of these digital commons, I've noticed that you could say we're building this as a platform co-op, or this is a community network, or this is free and open source software. Isn't it great? You say that sort of assuming that they are actually practicing the social system, the governance and co-ownership of those systems, but many times, and nothing is perfect, right? But at the same time, I would say that I think oftentimes I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that they aren't actually living by the values that they are sort of publicly saying in the internal organization of that project. And so is the form of these digital commons like superseding the actual like feeling and reality of that being a commons? So while I was preparing for this talk, actually, and these are actually things I've been thinking about for a long time, but it was actually really great that I had to do this presentation, because it actually made me think about this for the last couple of days, where it's like, okay, if there's one sort of angle in which we can look at this, I thought that there was this kind of like nested approach to this work. And so I'll talk about 3 of them tonight, or today. I'm sure morning in other places. The first is that the community has to define its shared values. The second is that we need to build a culture of trust and mutual respect. And then 3 is to establish clear boundaries around labor. And I'll go into those 3 now. So defining shared values. So for many projects, and I think many technologies that we use, the values not only are they not explicit, they're not sort of written into the bylaws and the DNA of the organization. If you think about like Google and Meta or Facebook or any of these organizations, really the main goal for them is profit. And what that means is everything else, any kind of value, any kind of social benefit sort of gets thrown out the window, just bulldozed and trashed on, because they can't. I mean, even if there are great people who really believe in even Twitter, even if there are people there who really believed in it being something like a public square where you can have healthy dialogue around local news or world news, at the end of the day, a billionaire could buy it because he offered a large price for it. And all of that just disappeared in the course of a few weeks. And arguably, maybe it's not disappeared yet, but that's subjective. And so really, it's really that the organizations need to not only define them, but truly embody them. And so this is a photo from DWeb Camp. I've been involved with DWeb organizing since 2019. I helped produce this event a couple of years ago. The Internet Archive, as Brewster, the previous speaker, was saying that the Internet Archive has been sort of taking the lead in hosting and stewarding conversations around what the DWeb, the decentralized or distributed web, could be. And so really bringing together a lot of people who are thinking about this question from across the network stack, from the protocols to the networks that we access these services, like the last mile infrastructure as community networks, or the applications. And so the first two events were summits. The first one in 2016 was actually held here. And I remember being in a room actually right across the room where people were sort of talking about distributed autonomous organizations, before it's been used, worldwide. So it's really has been bringing together people who have been thinking about this very intentionally and philosophically for a long time. In 2019, we decided to have this event outside. We realized that if we were actually going to build infrastructure that roots us with each other as humans and also with the planet that we live on, that has finite, limited resources, that we should actually be outside, grounding ourselves in our world, in our reality, versus kind of like being too much in our heads and philosophizing about it too much. So at DWeb Camp 2019, we started to have some conversations around like, what do we want from DWeb? What is this that we actually want? Instead of saying we just don't want something to be centralized and be in opposition to what we know, what is it that we actually are wanting to build? And so this is a photo of one discussion that was held at DWeb Camp around like, what do I want as a contributor to this, as just a visitor or as a company? And that sort of snowballed into 2020 when another core contributor to the DWeb work, John Connor Ryan, and I were sort of brought together from Wendy Hanamura, who is one of the core leaders of this movement, to actually think about this, to hatch something and actually define this. And so over the course of a year, John and I, we drafted a version of the principles. We had everyone critique it all the way down very thoroughly, which was great. We just kept going back to the drawing board after every time we got feedback, and to just make it, to sharpen it, to really try and reflect what this community believed in, that was actually not just decentralized, but something more. And I say it's version 1.0 because we want this to be a living document where it's not the static thing that we just continue to think about can we be smarter and more intentional about what we care about. So this is the preamble for the DWeb principles. These principles define the values of a decentralized web based on enabling agency of all peoples. It is the basis for behavioral norms and mutual accountability. These principles originate from members of the DWeb community, those involved with and convened by the Internet Archive's work on the decentralized web. These stand alongside other sets of principles that share or expand upon these values in recognition that our efforts to build a more just and equitable world are interdependent. So I just wanted to flag 2 quick points about this, which is that we're very clear that this is representing a specific community whose values are reflected in this document, and that we are not trying to supersede other efforts in defining principles, but that we recognize that we kind of fit into a quilt of other efforts to, for humans to work together and build a just and equitable world. So I'm not gonna read all of them. I just wanted to highlight a few of these. So we have 5 sort of overarching themes of these principles. The first one is technology for human agency. I'll just read a couple of these. We stand for technology that enables the primacy of people as beneficiaries of the technology by upholding their security, privacy, and self-determination. I'll read the 4th one. We aim for peer-to-peer relationships rather than hierarchical control and power imbalance. And in number 6, in part 1, we believe that multiple technical means will be more effective than a single technical solution to achieve ethical and people-centric outcomes. Distributed benefits. We believe that decentralized technologies will be most beneficial to society when the rewards and recognition of their success, monetary or otherwise, are distributed among those who contributed to that success. Mutual respect. We support and encourage clear codes of conduct to ensure respectful behavior and accountability. And we stand for open and transparent organizational practices, motivations, and governance in a manner that actively pursues equity, mutual trust, and respect. And number 4, empower people. The objective of building a decentralized web is to protect human rights and empower people, especially those who experience systemic inequity and prejudice. And I don't want to read all of it, but let's see, I'll read the last one. We encourage the development of tools and applications in many languages and forms with a high degree of accessibility. And last but not least is in ecological imperatives. We believe projects should aim to minimize ecological harm and avoid technologies that worsen environmental health. And you'll actually notice that this title is different from the previous slide, ecological awareness. That's actually one thing that we are hoping to change about the principles, is to make this principle about ecological imperatives much stronger, given the global crisis of climate change and everything else that we're inflicting on the planet. So these are just a list of some of the principles. If you go to getdweb.net/principles, you'll be able to see these. You'll be able to sign on, read them, digest them. But we really felt like this is just one effort at defining what it is we stood for. And we really hope that other projects across the DWeb uphold these in their work. The second sort of like sub approach to that defining principles is that organizations and people should build cultures of trust and mutual respect. A peer-to-peer decentralized web is just not possible unless we have as many people participating, if people feel safe to be themselves, to build relationships, and then actually enjoy themselves. It should not be such a slog. It should not just feel like work. Sometimes it will feel like work, but it should be fun to actually build something with other people. And as decentralized web projects, we really try to make that experience at DWeb Camp and through all of the events that we do. We want to ensure that there isn't this kind of like elitism in the space. We want to make sure, even if you're not a technologist, even if you're not doing, governance, even if you are just completely new to the space, you, as somebody who has interacted likely with the internet, with any technology, you have opinions about how it should work. And then, if you are a teacher, if you're a musician, if you are unhoused, if there's just, your human experience needs to be accounted for in the peer-to-peer decentralized web that we're building. And so when we were building DWeb 2, we wanted to make sure that those who are building the infrastructure, were participants of camp. Like, we all just wanted to show, this isn't some kind of like fancy event where, there's like this invisible labor happening to build all the infrastructure. We're actually building this, and that all of us are doing this together. And so we really try and embed our events with that spirit. And this is a photo from DWeb Camp 2022. We had over 420 people there. I believe close to 20 children as well. We really want to make sure that children are part of the discussion, because, this is the legacy that we are leaving to them. And so yeah, that was the second kind of approach to this decentralized web work that I really think about. Number 3 is establish clear boundaries around labor. And as I said, around the people that are building the infrastructure at camp, or, and also all these people who are maybe like involved in technology, but aren't necessarily technologists, there's not enough focus on how everyone is a very valuable participant in building the kind of networks that we want in the future. And and all of the technologies that are really exciting, IPFS, all the protocols and the community networks, there's so much volunteerism. There's so many people who, because they pour their heart into it, they aren't compensated and they get burnt out. And that just is not sustainable. We really need to just think about that as a foremost priority in any kind of system where we're trying to build a better world. And this goes back to the first approach, which is, if we're not thinking about how we're treating ourselves and each other in building these technologies, then it's not going to be a technology that will be sustainable. And so I think one part of that is making compensation explicit. Why not? We should really be thinking about how we're paying ourselves and make that less uncomfortable to talk about. So having said all that, there's one other project that I've been leading called Compost. It is a magazine and an open source tool for publishing to the decentralized web. So it's 2 sister projects. It's a magazine about the digital commons, where we curate works of art, reflection, and experiments about building the web as a shared resource. And then Distributed Press, an open source publishing tool that enables content to be published and monetized on the World Wide Web and decentralized web. And so the way that this project came about was, we first were thinking about, okay, we want to make a tool for having content on different DWeb endpoints, much like the project that was introduced before me. While we were thinking about this, we were like, okay, cool, we want to make a tool, but we should also have people who would use this tool participate in the development of this technology, and also be talking about what the purpose and potential is of the decentralized web. And so Compost is kind of like an active use case of this tool. And it's a way for artists and activists and people who work with offline communities who don't have access to the capital I internet to practice and thinking in and also participate in the development of the decentralized web through Distributed Press. Distributed Press is also trying to be its own digital commons and that it's a free and open source tool. We experiment with the kind of like capabilities of three main protocols, IPFS, hypercore, and torrents. And so while we're doing it, we're also filing bugs, helping sort of like think about how these tools can be used for publishing. And we're kind of just trying to be sort of this like glue or bridge across these protocols to sort of like shine a light into the ways that these could work. And so the tool Distributed Press and Compost as a magazine, the goal is for them to sort of like feed into each other as they kind of like grow together. In the very beginning, before we launched Compost, it was really important for me to also to know that the other founders and I like were aligned with what we actually believed in. And so we went on our own sort of journey to establish our values. And so our sort of three main pillars are solidarity economics. So making sure that we share revenue, that we are compensated for our labor, that this won't be another volunteer project where we all love it and then we get burnt out and never want to look at it again. We really want it to be sustainable. That we have meaningful participation. So we really work with and emphasize the fact that there are many underrepresented artists and activists who are not participating in the development of the decentralized web. And then and also for creative experimentation. The reason why a lot of us go and are addicted to the internet is actually because of like all the memes and the videos and the jokes and the music that we get to see. So why not make that for the decentralized web so that then we can actually seek some content on the decentralized web that's not necessarily on the World Wide Web. And so this was our first issue that came out in March 2021. You'll notice that the URL here is hyper. So this could be accessible on the hypercore protocol. This is issue 2 on IPFS, which you can get to through IPNS://2.compost.digital. You can use the Brave browser or Aggregor browser to visit the page on IPFS. And I guess a couple notes here, which the previous speaker was also talking about, like sustainable labor and making sure that we get compensation. So far, this project has been funded by grants, but we'd really like to have it be a subscription model. We have an account on Open Collective, which is a platform for nonprofits to fiscally host any number of other projects that don't have legal incorporated status, and allow them to receive money and distribute money in a transparent way. And so we have an Open Collective account that is fiscally hosted by a co-op in Toronto called Haifa Worker Cooperative. We really want to try and build that. Another point here is that because Compost, Compost itself is like a zip file, almost like it's a tarball that everything is self-contained. So we have text pieces, and we also have some interactive maps and interactive story pieces, and that's all self-contained in JavaScript in this file. And the whole thing, we want it to be copied in as many places as possible, because that's how the decentralized web should work. At the same time, we want to make sure that the contributors to the magazine are compensated well. So that's a large part of our funding, is we make sure that in helping, in writing and building their piece for Compost, they also are compensated for their time in giving us their feedback for Distributed Press and informing the tool. And the works need to be Creative Commons licensed, because if we're wanting it to just kind of spread everywhere, you know, like seeds, we don't want there to be any question that this is copyrighted and anyone to be afraid that they're hosting something that could be taken down. And so that's an agreement that we have to make with the creators from the very get-go. And so we're hoping that those kind of considerations sort of change the sort of like thinking and equation around creative labor, because I'm very biased against copyright, but copyright, I think, is not a good model for many artists to make money. And so I think it's the decentralized web is a really good time to be thinking about how we make new types of ways for artists to get paid. How am I doing on time? Okay, so I think I'll have about 5 more minutes. And so those are the three kind of approaches that really guides my work, but I kind of wanted to share just a few quotes to leave you with those before I close out. There was an incredible writer and philosopher named Audre Lorde, a Black queer feminist writer who wrote this essay, Uses of the Erotic as Power. And it's just a couple pages essay, but it really has shaped how I think about being an organizer and a writer. I'll just share this quote. I think I have 2 quotes here, but for as we begin to recognize our deepest feeling, we begin to give up, of necessity, being satisfied with suffering and self-negation, and with a numbness which so often seems like their only alternative in our society. My little thing is blocking the quote. The next quote is, the sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers, which can be that basis for understanding much of what is not shared between them and lessens the threat of their difference. For once we begin to feel deeply all aspects of our lives, we begin to demand from ourselves and from our life pursuits that they feel in accordance with that joy, which we know ourselves to be capable of. And so I come back to this essay so many times because as I said in the beginning, that first idea of defining our values, we should feel really good in the work that we're doing. You know, that's, I think, the goal. And that when we are building the world we want to see, it should not be, we are building something in the future that's going to be great, you know, promise, eventually it's going to be sustainable. Eventually it's going to be great. We should be trying to do that every day in the building that we're doing. And she talks about this as like erotic power, but it's, what she means by erotic is like that deep feeling when you're like, she even talks about if you're reorganizing your bookshelf and then, you know, you just like, you get lost in organizing your bookshelf and then suddenly it feels, you know, it's all organized and you just feel very satisfied in that work. How do you feel that deep satisfaction with yourself and what you're doing and in the work that you're doing with others? And then another writer, let's see, that writes about this is Adrienne Marie Brown. And she also really has this idea of pleasure activism rooted in Audre Lorde's work as well. So pleasure activism asserts that we all need and deserve pleasure, that our social structures must reflect this. In this moment, we must prioritize the pleasure of those most impacted by oppression. And so not just thinking about how we enjoy this and find satisfaction in our work in maybe the positions of access that we have, but also saying, how do we make sure that those who are most suffering today can feel that and can be part of that? And these two kind of ideas really drive my work. So what's next? This is a photo of just some of the great kids that made a parade at DWeb Camp in 2019. They are the future. There's a lot of space right now to, I think, define what is decentralization and what peer-to-peer truly means. Let's see. there was just this article in The Atlantic that interviewed Brewster and I that kind of defines DWeb as opposed to Web3. I wrote this piece that's kind of trying to separate out what DWeb versus Web3 means, and the kind of like values that are embedded, I believe, in both of these terminologies. But just join us. Like what does decentralization to you? And even if it's not decentralization, that's the other thing, is that we want this to be a very plural, diverse movement where DWeb is just like one point in which we organize ourselves. If you rather say distributed or peer-to-peer or even Web3, what is it that you're really trying to do to change the world and make it better? I think that's really what the point is. So our next DWeb camp is in June 2023. Put in your calendars. We are also helping our DWeb friends in Brazil organize a camp in April 2023. Dates are still to be decided. And we have virtual meetups. And so we try and change the time zone. So sometimes it's better for like European, North American time, or it's always good for North America, sadly, because some of us are here, but it's either going to be better for you in Europe or Asia Pacific. So you can sign up to our newsletter at getdweb.net. And if you're interested in staying in touch with Compost and learning what's going on with Compost as a project, we're on Mastodon at compost.social. It's actually should be at compost@social.coop. We're on Instagram, unfortunately. We're also on Twitter, but I don't know how much longer we'll be on Twitter. And then you can check out our issues there at the URLs, either on IPFS or HTTP. And then our next issue is coming out in March 2023. And I'm also on social.coop on Mastodon at mai@social.coop. So thank you.
Thanks so much for the speech, man. It's truly amazing. I mean, I don't really want to waste our time, but I just want to make a few like comments of my own, because like, yeah, she said
you should stand in the.
Oh no, it's all right, it's all right. Okay. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. But how?
How you...
It's a blog. Oh yeah. Oh, it's here. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. So I think like Mai also mentioned that you're gonna like feel pleasure on what you're doing. I think this is what I have been doing or what has been like supporting me for the past years, because we have been fighting for like digital like privacy and then users data ownership, but no one like in the industry seemed to like understand this. Everybody, like as you said, like as a corporation, everybody what they're caring about is just revenue. It's making money, but no one really cares about users. I think like what really drives me to love like Internet Archive is that you guys are putting your heart, you're putting love into all the things you are doing. It's not making money, it's making love. Look, no, sorry.
Not like that.
It's making people love each other.
Yeah.
And that's what's important here. And thank you so much for the speech.
I mean, can I just comment on that a little bit? Yeah. I mean, I think we're very scrappy, so I think revenue is important, like making ways in which people can contribute their resources to support something and then distributing that to the people who are doing that work is really important. It's just that when profit, like how much money you make at the end of the day, is the only goal, that's when everything else gets sacrificed, right? And so I think for us, like we wish we also had, I think, a better, not a business model, but a sustainability model. But I think there's actually a lot of really exciting discussions happening around how to not be allergic to the discussion of money in a nonprofit context. And I think, as I said, Open Collective is doing really interesting work around that. And maybe if I'm out of time, I need to stop, but I want to,
no.
okay, really
quickly. This is a
quickly.
discussion time. So.
Oh, okay. So really quickly. So Open Collective itself is a corporation, but when they received venture capital money from investors, they were very clear from the beginning that they wanted to not just sell out to shareholders. Mm-hmm. And so they wrote into their bylaws that they want to turn it into a cooperative in the future. And so the people who invested understood this from the beginning. They do, get whatever terms that they get, but it's not some sort of like normal sort of like going public, IPOing kind of model. And I think that type of like, how do we make, because they needed that money, right, in the beginning, right, to really build that platform, mm-hmm, but they also didn't want to sell out, and become like Twitter and all the other companies. So I think it's really important that we like think about how to do those types of experimentations in innovation that is like very practical with money, and at the same time is like very clear about how they're compensating people and, right, how they fit into the ecosystem.
So yeah, I mean, in short, just don't do volunteers anymore, right?
Yeah. Or if it's a volunteer, then maybe you're paid, and it's okay if it's volunteers, right? As long as it's like explicit what the relationship is, and it's like, and you're checking in and all that.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah.
Alrighty, thanks for that. I mean, there are a bunch of questions. I would just like say it aloud, but thank you for your talk. I feel like a perspective of sexuality should be addressed as well, given that the gender context of the coding world. Do you want to comment on that?
Perspective of sexuality.
What gender?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll say that this DWeb work, a lot of us are women or non-binary people. And then also even Open Collective, which I just talked about, is led by women. And I'm not saying that that's like that men can't do this. I'm just saying that I think there's this understanding of a lot of the care work that is not thought about in a lot of tech spaces and is taken for granted. And so I think when you actually have projects that are not just run by men and also of people of different genders, of different sexualities, you just kind of open up a lot of conversation around how we are organizing ourselves. And so I don't know if that's like the specific answer, but I do think that I really hate that even this labor is gendered. It should not be. It should not be. But I think just given historical context, that's just how it is.
Right. Okay. I guess this question is also for you specifically, but thank you for your talk. It's a very insightful reflection on DWeb that I have heard recently. And I noticed that you had an Everett project before, a student-led and student-taught project that aims to help students become what we call social justice tech entrepreneurs. I found this project very interesting. Can you just tell us a little bit about the difficulties and the learnings in doing this project?
Sure, yeah. So I kind of got my start in all this with the Everett program, which is a student project at the University of California, Santa Cruz, which is where I went for my bachelor's degree. And it was founded by a sociology professor who was teaching globalization in a class called World Society. And he had many students come up to him, when he was talking about like the terrible ills of globalization and, neoliberalism and trade and how harmful that was for a lot of economies and developing economies. And they said, like, what can we do? And so he started meeting with undergraduate students, and they were like, well, actually, this was like in the late, I guess, mid 1990s, early 90s. And they're like, well, there's the internet, and, college students know how to use websites. They know how to use all these things, but a lot of nonprofits didn't know how to do that. And so they decided to make a student governed student program where students taught technology to each other and and also would practice governance with each other in the program. And so the sort of like the course is you learn about different ways of nonprofit organizing to social enterprise and all of that. And then you take some sort of passion, whether that's education, reproductive rights, environment, and then you find a nonprofit that is working on that, and then you raise money from yourself, from grant money, and then do an internship to build them a website, build a database for them, or any technology that they actually need, and then you build that for them. And so not only as a student are you learning how to do these technologies out there, you're actually then, while you're interning with a nonprofit, you're learning about their cause and how they're doing that work. So yeah, I think definitely the Everett program has always been very core to my work. I'm also the founder of the alumni organization. I've been kind of involved since I graduated. So yeah, it's been a thing. But I think the website is everettprogram.org. You can definitely find it through Everett program. And my internship was when I was an undergraduate. I worked in Malaysia with a Muslim feminist organization for 6 months and build websites and a database around Sharia law and child support.
All right, thanks so much. I guess we got a bunch of more questions, but I think these questions are not just for you, but for all the speakers today. So one of them is as you said, we gotta have pleasure while we're doing stuff. But how do you think in a decentralized web, how could one have a clear purpose or a clear goal, and while also being super active and how do you have this clear? How do you find your goal, and then how do you work towards it?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning of a project, maybe,
or as an individual who wants to join the DWeb movement or other decentralization movements. What should we do?
Yeah, what should we do? I mean, I think the first step is to sort of take a bite. There's so many aspects of this, right? What do you like doing, I think, is the first question. Then the second question is what do you care about? And so maybe those come at the same time, because you need to think about what part of this problem do you want to help solve? And that's the thing about this is none of us can do this alone. None of these technologies will be the thing that will fix everything. So what you might do after sort of figuring out what do you want to work on and what do you like doing is then do your research around what other people are already doing to solve that problem. And then you can either volunteer, with them, hopefully not a volunteer, hopefully get hired to do that work, or just research it and see how you can help. People are already thinking about most things. People have already thought about these problems. So don't I would not suggest just saying I think I have the solution. I'm going to go work in the corner and code it. And then here, I'm going to present it to the world. But actually, learn and talk to people. And so with the DWeb, the virtual meetups, we really try and make it open. So we have lightning talks where people talk about their projects. And then afterward, we go to GatherTown and enable people to talk to each other and find each other. So yeah, I mean, I think it really is to either get involved in something that already exists or find other people who care about the same thing and build that with them. It's, I think, really hard to do anything by yourself. So being clear about what you like to do, what your goals are, and what the problem is that you want to solve, I think is the first step.
Alrighty, thanks so much. I just don't really want you to talk too much because it's super, I know.
Yeah, I'm fine. No, is there more? There's one or two more questions.
I think it's just the last question.
Okay.
It's for both of you guys, Libet and Mai. So, because as you said, you don't think copyright is the best for creators? Why? Or which is better? And like for creators, what should I take? What role, what like means should I take to make money or to be sustainable? Because as you said, like in DWAP, where like the movement that you've been joining, you just want to help like creators like or artists to sustain without like using the current like I don't know a business model or stuff. But what is the possible way for them to sustain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a crisis right now. Even if, I mean, if you look at Spotify, where artists make like less than a penny per play, to you know, any, or like people who just do so much free labor on TikTok or Instagram, you know, they make like memes and whatever, and they're just not paid. I think the current model is just not working. And I think there are efforts to make that better, right? I think like Patreon and you know, Kickstarter and other ways where you have direct relationships with your fans. So you know that as somebody contributing to an artist that you are paying for their work.
Right.
I think those types of models, if we had that more decentralized, would be better. So, I mean, even Patreon and Kickstarter take a huge cut. I think they, if you have followers on Patreon, you can't, I think, export your contact list, or at least you couldn't before. So they really capture you on the platform. And so I think it really is about, like, there's just such a big gluttonous fat middleman, you know, in the middle, that is just like sucking up all this value. And it's really outdated. And I think it's really time for that. You know, editors and publishers do have a role, but they're really, because they're monopolies, they're taking a huge cut of that. And there's actually a really good book that just came out called Choke Point Capitalism, by Rebecca Giblin and Cory Doctorow, that talks about all the different ways that that's happening. It's pretty US focused, I would say, but you know, many of these platforms are used around the world, and then have some really concrete solutions for how to make that better. So I'll just highlight two of those. Like one is collective, like joint action. So like when artists like can collectively say, we are not going to, you know, use this platform anymore, and we're going to use something else. Like there are examples of cooperative streaming services like Resonate Co-op, that actually give the value of the streams to artists. And so there's like that kind of model. They also talk about like Taylor Swift, who did a lot of advocacy for other artists and actually raised the amount that artists get from Universal for each stream. And so that type of leadership is like, we need that type of activism, right? And then the other one is, you know, other alternative streaming services, like there are these new open source tools like MusicCat, which a couple US libraries are using, where the library can host local artists on their library streaming platform. And so they'll pay like $250 or something to this artist that is local, and then you can stream that album from the library. So instead of like, you know, having to go to Spotify, they actually get more, probably way more money from that, even if it's, you know, $250 isn't a lot, but at least for, you know, exposure, it's something. And so I think like different business models, work like organizing with other artists, and I think, you know, if like copyright is on the table, to really think about, you know, is copyright helping you? Are there other tools and other licensing methods that could be better? I think as an artist, having sort of a reflection on that might be healthy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the answer. And yeah, hey, Livit, are you still online? I mean, if you want to like elaborate more on this, you can just definitely go ahead. But yeah, you can just.
Talk about, okay, I'll end with my experience in Malaysia, I guess. The question is, would you like to talk more about your experience in Malaysia? It influenced the things you're doing now? Yes, definitely. Yeah. I went to Malaysia when I was 21, and I think it was a really big, I think the biggest thing that was eye-opening for me was like how much space the US takes around the world, you know, like I was there, this will age me, you can do the calculations, but I was in Malaysia during the Obama election, and the first one, and you know, people were really excited about Obama, and it was so interesting to me that like there was like impersonators of Sarah Palin, you know, Sarah Palin was ridiculous. And there was a show, there's a US show called Saturday Night Live, where this comedian, Tina Fey, plays Sarah Palin. And like the number of people that I ran into who knew Tina Fey and then knew SNL was just like, oh my God, I felt kind of like ashamed in a way, because I was like, wow, I think as an American, like it feels like it's kind of the center of the world, but like it should not be, first of all. And then I just felt like I didn't know anything about Malaysian politics before I got there, you know? And so I think that was a big thing for me, was like not sort of getting stuck in this idea that the US should be the center of things. And I think today too, with this DWeb work, really trying to sort of decenter the US in the decentralized web work, I think is a really big priority for us. Like not only should it not just be the US or in English, but in a lot of other, you know, languages and sort of like understandings of and cultural understandings of how information should be stewarded. And so, yeah, I think that was, I mean, I could talk all night about how Malaysia was interesting, but I think that's like the most relevant thing for now.
Okay, thank you so much for everything, like the speech and yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Right, for sharing all of these to us, and it's super important to, at least, like, I'm not sure, but like especially for us, like the Chinese audiences, we can definitely just learn more about like how this like DWeb thing is going on, because I've been talking about like DWeb like since I went back to China like in 2019, but but never got the chance to really have all the you know organizers to talk about it. So thank you so much for for sharing. And then so Olivia, do you have anything that you want to like elaborate on, especially on the IP, or if not, I think I can just kind of wrap it up and then say bye. Sorry, it's been.
I'm good. Thank you. Yeah.
If you want to say something, go.
Well.
Oh,
yeah.
Damn, my bad. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And I think it's been a while. And thank you so much. And by the way, so if you are curious about the product that I showed today, that I will share a link in the comments, and it's a GitHub link. So basically we are building an open source website builder, and you can find the source code and try the product on GitHub if you are interested. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much for sharing. I guess I can just wrap up with like a few sentences today, and so thanks everybody for helping out build this like conference, because Wendy, Brewster, Mai, and you can without you guys, and the homie, and then Hannah, without you guys, just this cannot happen at all. And thank you so much for all the audiences and all the speakers today, because it's I think it's a really fruitful all 5 speeches are super fruitful, and then we learned a lot about how you guys think about P2P, and then how we should like consider P2P or Web3 or DWeb or like distributed web or like decentralized web. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, I think as Mai said, like, we don't really need to talk about like the terms ourselves. All it matters is our goal, is like how we are reuniting people together, how we like, you know, improve the process of like cooperations. It doesn't matter what the terms we're talking about. What matters most is the things we're working on, and then work with pleasure. And thank you so much for coming today. stay tuned for our like next 6 city panels in next week. And I guess that'll be it. 哦，对，我应该用中文说，对不起。Sorry, I should say it in Chinese. But yeah, 谢谢大家今天能够来我们这。
Everyone, thank you for joining us for our annual conference. Well, stay tuned for next week. On our WeChat public account and website, we have several works from Taipei, Shanghai, Shanghai, Wuhan, Hangzhou, and also in the 6 different cities. And we have several more city panels. Stay tuned for that. You can find information on our web chat, on our webpage. So we hope that we can see you then.
Thanks so much, guys. And yeah, I think I'll just cut the